Welcome back to the It's Too Easy podcast. I'm Jake. This is my brother Zach. It's the Lenny brothers. Coming back for college football week 2. Man, we got our butts absolutely kicked last week in week 1.
Bent
Obviously,
over.
yeah, and obviously we were kind of expecting a little bit, probably a little bit better than that. But man, feel bad for anybody who tailed us because that was a rough week. Obviously, didn't know too much about these teams, but we've definitely figured some things out on both the offensive and defensive side of the balls. Transfers played a huge role last week in week 1. So hoping that we kind of have a baseline now that we can kind of build some momentum off of. Got a little bit smaller slate this week, but do think it's going to turn out really well. I really liked where these lines were at and where we got them at. So we are going to go ahead and share them with you guys. First game on the slate is Northern Illinois at Maryland. Maryland looked great last week. I can't remember who they played, but they ended up winning like 39-7 against a team where
Florida Atlantic.
we actually expected Florida Atlantic to be able to cover the line, but it wasn't close. And if Maryland
They started hot.
Yeah.
It was 7-7 at one point, but then it wasn't. So
Yeah, then Maryland just rolled. And I think that's going to happen again. They're at home in this game. Right now the line's 17.5. I feel like that's just a little bit too low. Not very respectable for a team that just won 39-7 last week, especially against the Florida Atlantic team that's usually actually been pretty decent. So I think that Maryland will be able to cover 17.5 in this first game.
yeah, didn't take them last week, and now at home 17.5 again against Northern Illinois. I don't see why they shouldn't cover it, so I'm going to take that as well.
Yep. Second game, Illinois at Duke. Actually, pretty intriguing one. Illinois, obviously, with Altmaier, looked pretty solid in week 1. Their defense also looked pretty good. Duke, same thing. Defense looked pretty good. Offense also looked a lot better than I was expecting. Illinois is only 2.5-point favorites here on the road. I just think that they're the more complete team. So I'm going to go ahead and lay that 2.5.
Yeah, games like last week's Illinois game make me really think that betting is rigged because Illinois was 48.5-point favorites in week 1 when nobody knows anything, and they won by 49, just barely covered by half a point. Okay. Anyway, this game will be really interesting. I hate Luke Altmaier with my guts. I do think that Illinois will probably win at Duke because they can run the ball well. And he had a solid year last year, as much as I hate him. And he started with 17 for 21 in week 1. Granted, against a bunch of scrubs. Now he's going on the road into Duke. I do want to root for the Blue Devils. They have Darian Mensah at quarterback, who was at Tulane as a solid Tulane starter for them last year. And they looked very good themselves in week 1. So my heart is with Duke, but I am going to stick with Illinois as well. They're ranked 11, and I clearly don't know enough about college ball yet. So I'll just stick with what the people that say they know what ball is are saying, and that's Illinois to win this game.
Yep, love that. Then we got a rivalry game, Iowa and Iowa State. In-state rivalry game. I think it's going to be super exciting. Typically on in-state rivalry games, I will just go with the home team. So that's kind of what I was going back and forth for and ended up settling on Iowa State. Love the way they looked against Kansas State there in Ireland, I think it was. Ended up getting that dub. So I know you love their quarterback, so I am going to stick with Iowa State on the money line, even though I do think Iowa is going to be much improved this season, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Iowa was one of those teams that had really good value to make the college football playoff, where I was like, their defense is good enough. They got Gronowski, who was a 2-time champion in the FCS, and he looked solid for their week 1 matchup. I do think Iowa State, a better team, better competition, especially in a rivalry, is going to be able to get some turnovers. I think it could go both ways. And so with that, I'm just going to take the home team in Iowa State. Rocco Becht got it done against Kansas State in a big game, and then they got another big win last week. So off to a quick 2-0 start. Now at home, I expect them to keep that momentum rolling against former FCS QB that could have some errors against a better defense. So we'll take the Cyclones to go 3-0.
Yeah, super intriguing matchup, honestly, because both those offenses are pretty solid now, and then the defenses actually are both really solid as well. So I think that that'll be a pretty fun game in week 2. Next game, Baylor and SMU. Game is at home for SMU. Baylor looked pretty rough last week against Auburn. We were expecting Sawyer Robertson. He did have a really good game, but we were expecting them to be able to stay in the game. But it seemed like by the end of the second quarter, early third, they just weren't able to keep up. Jackson Arnold, the transfer from Oklahoma, looked really good for Auburn, which is pretty big shock considering he didn't look great at Oklahoma with a lot of weapons. But yeah, he ran the ball all over Baylor last week. So I don't really have a whole lot of trust in this Baylor defense. And Kevin Jennings for SMU is an absolute stud. I love the way SMU's looked on offense the past couple seasons. I think they snuck their way into the top 12 last year before getting absolutely blown out in the playoff. But yeah, I'm going to stick with them on the money line, and I think the over 64. That's a super high number, but I think it's super intriguing this game because Sawyer Robertson did throw for 400 plus yards and 3 scores last week. So as long as he can replicate that, I don't see a reason why this shouldn't go over that number.
Yeah, I'm glad we were saying tread with caution last week because we were like, Baylor was 5-1 at home. Sawyer's a dog. He should go off. He had 420 yards. They still lost by 14. And so with that said, SMU's defense, I won't expect to be any better than what Auburn was able to provide. Auburn was able to score on, I think, all but one possession in that game against SMU. So just big, long drives that couldn't be stopped, ending in points. So they lost, 38-24. Respectable game against an SEC opponent. But again, on the road at SMU made the top 12 last year before getting smacked by Penn State, I believe it was. SMU was indeed 8-0 last year at home. Not sure why they played 8 home games, but they did. They're at home in this one. I think it could be a shootout. I do think 64 is way too low for a game that I could see putting up 80 to 100. So 64, I am going to take the over just because why not? It's fun. It's two great programs, so 2 great offenses. I do like SMU to also get the win at home.
Yeah, love that. Then we got Ole Miss and Kentucky, another line that seemed pretty low. 9.5 for an Ole Miss team that absolutely clapped last week. Kentucky also got a nice win, but it wasn't nearly as impressive. Mark Stoops is the coach over at Kentucky, but I just don't think he's been getting it done. Last season, pretty mix and match of a season. Like they would win some decent games and then they would lose some that they shouldn't have. But I think Ole Miss is a pretty complete team. Lane Kiffin definitely has a lot of surrounding help. So I think that with the transfers they were able to get, with the recruits they were able to get, we obviously kind of saw the byproduct of that last week when they absolutely crushed. So I just feel like 9.5 is a little bit low. So I'm going to stick with Ole Miss minus 9.5. I think they're going to be able to get it done. Obviously, they're missing Jackson Dart, but their new QB stepped in really well and understood the offense. I think the big if in this game is Kentucky ran the ball really, really well last week. And Ole Miss typically has a really good front four. So if the front four can kind of hold up the run game of Kentucky, I don't see a reason that this game should be close because I do not trust Kentucky's defense whatsoever. Yeah, if they do, it'll definitely be a little bit closer. I'd imagine that's why they have the line at 9.5. But yeah, I love Ole Miss minus 9.5 in this game.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me, I don't really like this line. It's not that it's a 10-point line; it's that it's a 10-point line with a 50-point over/under. I feel like that's low for an Ole Miss team that can score 50 by themselves. And in a lower scoring game, that means you expect it to remain closer, especially if you're going to be able to run the football, you keep it close. So with that, I'm kind of thinking like a plus 10.5 Kentucky, but I don't like it, so I will probably stay away.
That's got to be based on Kentucky game last week. I think it was like 17-0, or it wasn't super impressive.
Yeah, they won 24-16 against Toledo. We had Toledo covering last week, and they got it done for us, but it was a backdoor cover, I'll say that. But yeah, Kentucky's offense looked terrible. Their quarterback, Calzada or whatever, who was a transfer in, at once played at Texas A&M, I believe, his freshman, sophomore years. Then with some garbage team last year, now at Kentucky. He was 10 of 23 in their win with a pick.
Yeah. And they did run the ball really well, but I mean, it's Ole Miss's front four, so it's tough to see that happening.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to get 10 yards a pop again. So I would lean on Ole Miss, but I don't really like the game. It just seems like a weird line, so I'm going to stay away.
Right on. Next one I got on my slate, Western Virginia at Ohio. For some reason, the line's only 3.5 in this game. Western Virginia got a whole new list of transfers and recruits, especially with Rich Rod coming back to rejoin the program. And I think that this win is definitely a must-win for them. I think that program is always better. It's always better for college football when that program is good because the fans over there can go absolutely nuts. I know it's like one of the big party schools for sure in the United States. So I'm really thinking that 3.5 is a line that's probably pretty low. So I'm going to go ahead and touch that at West Virginia minus 3.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go West Virginia. It is on the road. College teams usually suck on the road. Ohio was solid last week against Rutgers, only lost by 3
Yeah.
in a pretty high scoring game, so they were able to score the ball well. But I do think West Virginia, they got a lot of transfers. They were supposed to be extremely good last year, and I think this year there's even more hype around them. Pretty easy schedule for them. So if they can get this one, they could make a good run at 10 wins. I think Ohio State's going to be their only tough competition. So getting this one would be huge for them to start the year. And I'm
Yeah.
going to take them. I'm going to just take the money line, but I do think they'll cover that 3.
Yeah, right on. Then moving on, we got a game that we're on opposite sides of. South Florida and Florida, interstate rivalry this week. Talked a little bit about this before the podcast. USF looked incredible last week against Boise State. Granted, Boise State did lose quite a few guys to age, as well as Ashton Jeanty to the draft. So it was a little bit of a question mark for Boise State, and we kind of saw what happened without Jeanty. They got absolutely crushed, 34-7. Wasn't even close. Even with their
As
QB.
6 or 7 point favorites, too. It's
Yeah,
like you put
and
up 7.
that's with Mark Madsen or Marco Madsen or whoever their QB is returning. They got
Maddox.
two of their Maddox, but they got two of their best wide receivers back as well that he was really good with last year, and they just were non-factors in the game last week. So I don't think that that'll change a whole lot throughout the season for Boise State. I think it's going to be a tough one for them. But I do think that it gives me reason to take USF plus 17.5 in this game. Florida obviously looked great, but this is an intrastate rivalry. And with how well South Florida looked last week, I think they're going to have some momentum on their side in this one, and they should be able to cover 17.5. Not too confident about it just because Florida is obviously always a solid program. Love the Gators, but yeah, South Florida looked great last week, and I think that they should be able to keep themselves somewhere in this game.
Yeah, I really liked how South Florida performed last week. We obviously stayed away. We didn't even talk about that game because we were kind of leaning South Florida, and we didn't want to take an underdog against what was a good Boise State team the year before. So shout out to Byron Brown, Mr. Brown, if you're watching. Hello, good to see you. Look away because I'm about to fade your team and your son. But Byron Brown is a stud. He's the quarterback at USF. Dual threat, quarterback 2 years ago had 3,200 plus passing yards, almost 1,000 on the ground, so 4,000 plus yards, 35 plus touchdowns. He's very much a dual threat as he showed in week 1. But I saw 2 stats for Florida for their week 1 win, as well as winning by 50 plus points. They gave up 4 completions the whole game, and that wasn't because the team decided not to throw the football and only run it. They ran for 1.2 yards per carry. And so with that, they couldn't throw it. They couldn't run it. The Florida defense looked phenomenal in their
Yeah.
offense. I put up 55. Lagway came in with a lot of hype around him. He went 15 of 18 with 3 scores. They pulled him. They put in the backup. He went 70% completion with 2 or 3 scores. So just because they look so good on both sides, they're at home. Because it's an in-state rivalry, it's like, okay, it could be close. But I would say I'd probably take the points at USF, but because it's at Florida, I'm going to take minus 17.5. I think Florida is going to mop with Florida.
Right on. Yep. And then we got Tulane in South Alabama. Another one of those games where I just didn't feel confident that they had the line right. Tulane's only 9.5 point favorites, and they looked pretty solid last week against a decent team. So I'm going to ride the 9.5. I don't know much about South Alabama other than they're usually pretty cheeks. So with that, I'm just going to ride Tulane 9.5. I think they're always a pretty solid program, and 9.5 points just feels way too low for this game, even on the road.
Yeah. All right, so with Tulane, that's one of our favorite teams. We usually like to ride Tulane in recent years. Love their running back for the last few years who didn't get a touch at Oregon. Story for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, we like them. Took Northwestern against them last weekend. We're proved wrong. So we're just going to hop back on the Tulane bandwagon as we've been in recent years. Love Retzlaff, who came over from BYU last year after leading them to 10 wins or 11 wins maybe. And they did look really good against Northwestern, at least at home. South Alabama is usually good at running the football, but not much else. So if they can keep the ground game going and being able to finish long drives with touchdowns, I could see them covering 10. But I'm going to take Tulane to cover the 9.5 as well.
Right on. Moving on, ASU and Mississippi State. ASU did not cover last week, the 26 or 27 and a half they had. I figured they would be able to against Northern Arizona, but once again, one of those interstate, not so much a rivalry game, but two teams that do really not like each other. So I was interested to see why. And then I kind of watched the game, and it just seemed like ASU kind of let off the gas a little bit in that game once they got a 3-score lead. Um, Mississippi State, intriguing game. Mississippi State usually has this pretty solid defense. I'm not sure what their offensive situation looks like this year, but I love Dillingham. I love ASU. I love that roster. And in order for them to build their resume this year to make it into the playoff, I think that they're going to need to get a win here. They're 6.5-point favorites, and I'm going to go ahead and ride it. I love Levitt at quarterback. I do think that he is going to be definitely one of the QBs of the future. Maybe next year be in the Heisman race. But without Scadaboo, it was apparent that they were missing some things last week. So hopefully they can kind of mull that over in practice and figure it out, and be able to cover a touchdown here against Mississippi State.
Yeah, they got Shapen at quarterback for Mississippi State. He's in his 5th year now. Still hasn't really found his footing anywhere. I think this is his 2nd year at Mississippi State. He's not that great. They are at home, so I think that gives them a bit of an advantage. But after a kind of slow start and finish for Arizona State, they just kind of had the lead and coasted through with it.
Yeah.
Still won by 20. We shouted out our guy Jordan Tyson, had 140 and 2 scores. He's an absolute animal. I think he had 12 receptions as well. I expect him to have another great game. I could see this being a pretty high scoring game as well, with two teams that have offenses that could score a lot. But yeah, I mean, I like Arizona State to get the win. I do think that 6.5 is low because they're on the road. But if it was at home, I expect them would have been covered at least by 10.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm going to take them as if they're going to win by 10 plus and cover that 6 points.
Yep, right on. Then we got Michigan and Oklahoma. Another one that was pretty intriguing after Oklahoma had a great win last week. Michigan also looked pretty solid last week, but they're 6.5-point dogs here on the road against Oklahoma. Oklahoma, I just don't have a whole lot of faith in them playing a really solid Big Ten defense. Obviously, they're usually a pretty good team. They looked great last week, but Michigan was able to figure something out on the offensive side of the ball over the offseason. And they got the defensive coordinator from Ohio State who walked in, and they looked awesome on the defensive side of the ball. I expect more of that to continue, and for that reason, I'm going to stick with Michigan plus 6.5 on the road here.
Yeah, I like that. I know Oklahoma is one of those teams that I think that they have the potential to make a college football playoff run. You look at their schedule and you go, never mind, they're going to win 6 games. Like, it's just a really hard schedule. And so with that, I was even surprised that as an 18 seed versus a 15, they're favored by 6.5. I'd get like 3. And so that's kind of a weird line to me. Kind of makes me feel trappy. But either way, I'm going to jump into the trap and take Michigan plus 6.5. I do think that they should be able to win. Bryce Underwood just got his footing in, really, and he went for 250 and a score. Looks solid, didn't turn the ball over, wasn't too sloppy with it. And then Justice Hayes, their running back that transferred over from Alabama, had 10 yards a carry. I think he had 160 yards on the ground, which is how that's their bread and butter, is being able to pound the football and playing good defense. Their defense picked off New Mexico's quarterback 3 times. I expect the same to be true for Oklahoma. Maybe not 3 times with John Mateer, because I do really like Mateer. But I think that they could at least get 1 or 2 turnovers in the game and should be able to at least cover.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be a completely new look at a defense for Oklahoma. So hopefully Michigan can kind of keep themselves in there and keep themselves playing good D, especially getting the D coordinator from Ohio State. And then, hopefully Bryce Underwood will be able to get it done. 6.5, Michigan plus 6.5. Last 3 here on the slate. Georgia Southern at USC. Georgia Southern lost to Fresno State last week, 48-14, or something along
42.
those lines. 42-14. So 28-point win. I think USC is a much better team than Fresno State. I think that USC is actually getting some disrespect not being in the top 25. I had them preseason in my top 25 at like 16 or 18. I do think Maava looked great in week 1. Their backup quarterback looked all right. He held on to the ball a little bit too much. But obviously they didn't play a very solid team in Missouri State. I do think that this is going to be a little bit tougher game, but I don't see any reason that this offense that I don't think had a drive that they didn't score, maybe one or two drives where they punted throughout the entire game last week. I don't see why they shouldn't be able to cover 4 scores against a Southern team that got trounced by Fresno State.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I can remember the last time USC scored 42 plus in the first half, and let
Yep.
alone put up 70. It's
Yeah.
a team program that usually takes their foot off the gas after I'd say 50. And so I think Lincoln Riley's feeling the pressure, potentially having it be his last season. They've got to come out, they've got to perform. And if they're going to beat someone, they're going to beat them badly. And so I think that 27.5, they should easily be able to cover. Something that was different was that we don't see a lot is USC pounding the football. And they were
Yeah.
pounding the rock. They had three different guys in there running the football, all putting up 7 yards a carry. And that's very new for a team that can run for 300, but also throw for 300. Again, Missouri State's not all that. But if this team just lost by 28 to Fresno State, who's not all that, USC should be able to cover that line.
Yeah, I love that one. Then last two, we got UCLA and UNLV. That one's at home for UNLV. They're 3.5 point dogs at home. And I think that was just a little bit of a misinterpretation. UCLA looked terrible last week against Utah.
Horrendous.
Yeah, they lost like 48-7 or something like that, or something ridiculous, forty
Something
to
crazy.
seven. It was wild. And now, granted, Utah is a solid team, but they don't have their quarterback back this year. Well, I think Dan Pierre is back, but he only played like half the season after what's his nuts got hurt. But yeah, I don't think UCLA showed anything last week. I think defensively, I mean Utah is not known to be a great offensive team, but they crushed them. And UNLV is 2-0 to start the year. They're getting some disrespect at home, being 3.5 point dogs, and just 2-0. Like UCLA 0-1. I think Maliava is an absolute drama queen, and they haven't built anything around him. So they pretty much paid one dude, and then the rest of the team sucks. And that's the way it looked in week one. Don't expect much different here in week two. I think UNLV is going to likely get the win, so I would kind of maybe put a little bit of money on the money line. But 3.5 points is definitely something that's definitely worth taking as well. Even if UCLA wins by 3, we're covering. So love that.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever want to bet on UCLA again in my life after last week. That was
Well,
horrendous. They're terrible. Nico looked terrible. I think he had like a 40% completion. Didn't really run the ball for much. Yeah, Kyle Whittingham always has that team playing at Utah, especially on defense. So I was very surprised to see how well Devin Dampier was able to do after
yeah,
transferring, I believe, from New Mexico, or maybe it was UNLV. But yeah, UNLV, don't know enough about him to really make an educated pick against a UCLA team that you'd expect to be, above them.
decent.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but after watching UCLA, my first thought was like, I'm taking UNLV. Like they looked horrible. So
Yeah, keep in mind that game was at the Rose Bowl last week, and they still got crushed. So it's just like, how can you trust them on the road if they can't keep themselves in the game against the Utah team that was quite a bit depleted from the year before as well? So,
yeah,
yeah, I think that UNLV is a solid
exactly.
pick this week. Then last game on the slate, I know you're gonna love this. Stanford at BYU. BYU 18.5 point favorites at home. I thought that was super disrespectful. BYU absolutely beat the crap out of whoever they played last week. It was
Portland
not even
State.
close. I saw probably the hit of a lifetime on a kickoff return or a
Yeah,
punt
guy
return.
died out there. Yep.
That was unreal. If you haven't seen that, definitely get on YouTube or get on Facebook and search videos. That hit was incredible. I'm not sure I've ever seen quite anything like it. They even reviewed the hit for targeting, and it was clean, so that even made it more impressive to me. Um, yeah, I'd be scared if I was facing BYU right now. Coach always has a team playing super well. Stanford lost to Hawaii. Hawaii lost to Arizona by big. Um, I think just football math, BYU is probably going to win this game by 40 plus. But 18.5 just feels way too low in this game. So I'm definitely going to be riding that. And I'll probably end up buying it up to 29.5 or so, maybe 26, 27.5, kind of depending on how I'm feeling and what the line's looking like. But yeah, I feel like this is a game where BYU is likely going to win by a lot of points. And 18.5 is kind of disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about BYU a little bit. There's so much value on that team right now. They have a fairly easy schedule. no one can ever go in and beat them at home. They are just really good team at home.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I knew Bear Bachmeyer coming over, Puka's brother Chase Roberts is returning. Um, LJ Martin's still there on running the football. Like they just have a really well-rounded team. I was interested to see how Bear did. Obviously looked really good considering they won 69-0 as 49-point favorites. Expected them to cover the 40, obviously, but didn't know how much they had put the foot pedal to the metal. And I think they had 69 in the third quarter and didn't score in the fourth, something like that. It
Yeah.
was disgusting. Not to mention, yeah, kid almost died on the field. Beautiful hit. Yeah, it just sounded awesome.
One of the best
And
college football hits I've ever seen. I'm not gonna lie, that was
yeah,
incredible.
and so at home, only 18-point favorites. I love it. I think that that's a hammer lock. I love the Cougs. I love them at home. Stanford, I don't think can do anything well. I thought that they looked pretty mediocre, blowing their win against Hawaii, ended up losing it, and then last week nothing special. BYU, I expect to probably win their division, which there's a lot of value at right now. Depending on what book you're looking at, it's about plus 800 for them to win the division. After last year winning, I believe it was 11 games. Obviously, new quarterback with Retzlaff over to Tulane, and now having Bear in there, but Bear could even be better. And then they just have a lot more talent around the field. Defense obviously looks solid, having a goose egg on the board last week. So interested to see how that season goes. Shout out to the Cougs. I'm going to take them with the minus 18.
Yeah, right on. And that's gonna wrap it up for this week's slate. Hoping we can bounce back and have a little bit of momentum building this week for the future in the season. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Tail with caution, obviously. It's still week 2 of college football. But yeah, feeling a lot better about these picks this week after we've gotten to kind of a baseline after seeing the teams last week. So yeah, should be a really solid weekend of football. NFL, we got Thursday through Monday. So looking forward to all these games. If you guys enjoy our videos, make sure you like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Send us a comment down below. If you guys wanted to hear anything more, kind of just add to the podcast. Yeah, for now, we will see you guys next week with week 3 of college football and week 2 of NFL. We'll continue to kind of scatter the videos, do one for each, kind of just make it easier for you guys to distinguish the two instead of having a big long video. So yeah, till then, we'll see you guys later. Peace.